The chart is extraordinary. You have seen it 100 times. A modest monthly contribution, a reasonable rate of return, 30 years of time. The line starts flat. It stays flat for what feels like most of the chart. And then somewhere around year 20 it bends, really bends. And by year 30 the number in the top right corner is so large it looks like a mistake. You have seen this chart. You believe this chart. You have explained this chart to other people. And then you check your account at the end of your first month of investing. Your return is 2.91, not $2,901, $2.91. You contributed $500 and the market returned you $2.91. You knew this is how it would start. You understood the math before you opened the account. And somehow, despite knowing it completely, the 2.91 feels like a small and slightly embarrassing thing compared to the chart you have been carrying in your head. This is the specific experience that nobody in the personal finance space talks about. Honestly, compound interest does not feel like what the chart says it will feel like. Not at the beginning, not for a while. And the gap between what you know compound interest does and what you actually feel compound interest doing to your financial life is real and wide and normal, and nobody warned you it would be this specific. My name is Nick, and I spend a genuinely unreasonable amount of time thinking about the psychology of wealth building, specifically the moments where the intellectual understanding of how wealth works finally becomes a felt, physical, visceral knowledge. Because those are two completely different things, and the distance between them is where most people's financial journeys quietly end. If you have ever been completely convinced by the compound interest math and still not felt it working, hit subscribe, because today we are going inside the 3 specific moments where compound interest stops feeling fake and starts feeling real. And I will tell you right now what the 3 moments are. The first month your returns exceed your contribution. The first crash you survive with a gain. And the salary crossover, the day the portfolio is working harder than you are. 3 moments. None of them on the chart. All of them on the map. Before we go through each one, let me tell you what is happening in the gap between knowing and feeling. Because the gap is not a flaw in your psychology. It is a feature of how human beings process abstract versus concrete information, and compound interest for most of the journey is abstract information. Psychologists who study financial cognition have documented something called the effect heuristic, the finding that human beings make and evaluate decisions based largely on how those decisions feel, not just what they calculate. And compound interest in its early stages does not feel like anything. It calculates beautifully. The math is elegant. The 30-year projection is genuinely extraordinary. But the felt experience of compound interest at month 3 is a cup of coffee. And the human brain, as researchers like Paul Slovic have documented, is not built to be motivated by the abstract. It is built to be motivated by the concrete and the immediate and the felt, which is why almost every person who starts investing does so on intellectual conviction alone. They believe the math. They start the contributions. And then they wait for the feeling that the math promises, and the feeling does not arrive on schedule, because the feeling has its own schedule, and the schedule has 3 specific stops. Let me introduce you to 2 people. Casey and Riley started investing the same month 3 years ago, same income bracket, same monthly contribution of $600, same index fund, same starting balance of 0. Both of them had seen the chart. Both of them believed the math. Both of them started for the same intellectual reasons. 3 years in, their accounts are at similar balances, just over $25,000 each. The math has been identical, but their relationship with compound interest is completely different, because one of them has reached the first 2 moments, and the other has not reached either one. And the difference between those 2 people, in terms of how they experience their financial lives, how they think about money, how likely they are to still be investing in year 10 and year 20 and year 30, is not a difference in knowledge. It is a difference in felt experience. Here is the first moment. Moment 1. The first month your returns exceed your contribution. This moment arrives at a specific and calculable point in the investment journey. Return roughly 0.58% per month. The portfolio needs to reach approximately $103,000 before the monthly return exceeds a $600 monthly contribution. For a consistent investor contributing 600 a month starting from zero, that threshold arrives in approximately 11 to 12 years at a 7% average return. 11 years. That is a long time to wait for a feeling. But here is what changes the timing. This is not the only version of the moment. There is a smaller, earlier version of the same felt experience that arrives much sooner and does the same psychological work. The first month your returns exceed your contribution in a single month is year 11. But the first month your annual returns are larger than your annual contributions arrives in roughly year 7 or 8. And the first month where the return on your portfolio for that month is larger than your contribution for that month, even during a strong market month, can arrive much sooner than that. The specific version of the moment does not matter as much as the felt experience of it. The felt experience is this: for the first time in the investment journey, the portfolio is generating something larger than you are putting in. The money is no longer just accumulating, it is producing. Something is happening in the account that did not require your labor or your time or your decision. Something grew on its own. Casey experienced a version of this in month 31, not the full threshold. The portfolio was nowhere near 103 zalozen. But a strong market month returned more in that month than Casey contributed. The return was 80.47. The contribution was 600. And the specific, almost physical sensation of seeing a number generated by the portfolio that was larger than the number Casey put in for the first time in 31 months of consistent contributions was the first time compound interest stopped being a chart and became a felt reality. Casey has described it since as the moment the portfolio stopped being a savings account and started being an entity, something that did things on its own, something that was working alongside the monthly contribution rather than just absorbing it. Riley has not had this moment yet. Not because the math is different, because Riley exits and re-enters the market at irregular intervals, not dramatically, not recklessly, just inconsistently, and the portfolio has not built sufficient mass to generate a monthly return that exceeds the contribution even during a strong month. The math knows this moment is coming. The felt experience of it has not arrived, and without the felt experience of it, compound interest remains for Riley a concept that is believed but not known. Moment 2. The first crash you survive with a gain. This is the moment that converts compound interest from intellectual knowledge to physical knowledge. And it is the moment that most people never reach, not because the market does not crash, but because they do not stay to experience the recovery. Here is the mechanism. A market crash for an investor who has not yet experienced the full cycle feels like the chart was wrong. The line that was supposed to keep going up has gone down sharply in a way that is viscerally alarming regardless of how intellectually prepared the person was. The paper loss is real. The account balance is lower. The chart that was supposed to be the whole story is showing a chapter that the chart never quite prepared you for. For investors who have not yet reached moment 1, who are still waiting for compound interest to feel like anything, the crash feels like confirmation of a suspicion they have been managing, that the whole thing might not actually work, that the chart was theoretical and the loss is real, that the time to get out is now before more is lost. For investors who have reached moment 1, who have felt the portfolio generating returns larger than contributions even briefly, the crash feels different. It feels terrible still. Paper losses feel terrible for everyone, but underneath the discomfort is a specific knowledge that the discomfort cannot reach. The portfolio was doing something real before this crash, and it will do something real after it. Casey stayed through the first significant downturn in year 2. The portfolio dropped by a little over 20%. The paper loss was 4,800 on a 24,000 portfolio at that point. Expression genuinely alarming. Casey looked at the account less frequently, did not enjoy the experience at all, but stayed not from heroic discipline, but from the specific knowledge that the portfolio had already once generated more in a month than was contributed. The abstract was already slightly concrete. The crash could not undo that. And then the recovery came, as it always has historically. The portfolio returned to its previous high and continued past it. And the specific felt experience of watching the portfolio drop dramatically and then recover and then exceed its previous level. The complete cycle experienced in the body rather than on a chart, was the moment compound interest became physically real for Casey in a way that no chart or calculator had ever achieved. Because the chart shows you the cycle in advance, but knowing the cycle in advance and surviving the cycle in your own account with your own money are two different categories of knowledge. The first is procedural, the second is experiential. And experiential knowledge does not go away. It does not require willpower to maintain. It does not need to be reminded by a podcast or a financial article. It is simply known in the way that anything survived is known. Riley left during the same downturn, not at the bottom, a month after the bottom when the recovery had begun but felt uncertain. The exit was not dramatic, just a quiet decision that the timing was bad and re-entry would happen when things felt more stable. The re-entry happened 18 months later, after the recovery was well established and the market was near a new high. The complete cycle, the crash, the recovery, the new high, was never experienced from inside a position. And without that experience, the next crash will feel exactly like the first one did. Unknown, unsurvivable, probably the right time to exit. Most people who fail at long-term investing do not fail because they chose bad investments. They fail because they exit during a downturn before they have experienced the recovery. And they exit during a downturn before they have experienced the recovery because compound interest has not yet become experientially real enough to hold them through the discomfort of the drop. The chart is not enough. The calculator is not enough. The podcast episode is not enough. The only thing that holds an investor through a crash is having survived a crash. Moment 2 is both the most difficult moment and the most protective one, because once you have experienced the full cycle, the next crash is not unknown. It is the familiar middle of a story whose ending you already know from your own history. Quick gut check before moment 3. Which of the first 2 moments have you already reached? Think specifically. Not which ones you understand. Which ones you have felt. The month where returns exceeded contributions. The crash survived with a gain. Neither one or both. Name it honestly. Because where you are on the map determines what the work is. Moment 3. The salary crossover. This is the moment that changes how you see your own economic life permanently. And it is the moment that almost nobody in the personal finance space has described with the specificity it deserves. Here is the mechanism. At some point in the wealth building journey, the specific timing depends on income, contribution rate, and market returns. The annual return generated by the portfolio exceeds the annual salary, not passive income, not dividends specifically. The total return on the portfolio for the year, the amount the money grew through market appreciation and dividends and compounding in 12 months. This is different from moment 1, where monthly returns exceed monthly contributions. This is the specific moment where the portfolio is generating more economic value in a year than the job is. The money is working harder than the person is, and the person knows it. For a portfolio of 100,000 are generating a 7% return, the annual return is 70,000. If the salary is 65,000, the crossover has happened. The portfolio produced more than the job did, not passive income that can be spent, the total growth of the invested capital. But the number is real and the comparison is legitimate. This moment does not arrive quickly. At a 600 monthly contribution with a 7% return, a 100,000 portfolio takes approximately 30 years to build. But the specific version of the crossover, the moment annual returns exceed annual salary, does not require $1 million portfolio. It requires annual returns that exceed the salary. For someone earning $65,000, that requires a portfolio of approximately the $930,000. For someone earning $85,000, approximately $210,000. For someone earning $50,000, approximately $17,000. These are large numbers, they take time to build, but they are not infinity. Casey has not reached moment 3 yet. The portfolio is at $25,000. The salary crossover is many years away, but Casey has reached moments 1 and 2, and those 2 experiences have permanently changed how the portfolio is perceived. It is no longer a savings account. It is no longer an abstract chart. It is a thing that survived a crash, a thing that once in a strong month generated more than was contributed, a thing that is clearly, demonstrably doing something real, and that experiential foundation, 2 moments of felt reality, is the infrastructure on which moment 3 will eventually be built. Not with willpower, not with ongoing reminders, just with consistency over time in a portfolio whose nature has already been concretely understood through the body rather than the mind. Here is the uncomfortable truth about the three moments. The distance between knowing compound interest and feeling compound interest is not equally distributed across the journey. It is front-loaded. The early years of the investment journey, years 1 through 5, roughly, are the years where the math is most extraordinary and the felt experience is most ordinary. This is when the gap between the chart and the 2.91 is widest. This is when the market crash, if it arrives, will test an investor who has not yet had either felt experience. This is when most people who start investing quietly stop. The investor who survives years 1 through 5 without reaching moment 1 or 2, without a strong market month, and without a crash to survive, is relying entirely on intellectual conviction. And intellectual conviction is a real and valuable thing, but it is not as durable as experiential knowledge. It requires active maintenance. It needs to be reminded and reinforced and kept warm, and at some point in some market environment, it will be tested by a circumstance that is more vivid and immediate than any chart or article that supports it. The structural response to this is specific. 3 things that increase the likelihood of reaching all 3 moments. First, reduce the timeline to moment 1 by increasing contribution consistency. The moment your returns exceed your contribution arrives sooner when the portfolio is larger. The portfolio is larger when contributions are consistent and uninterrupted. Every month of consistent contribution is a month closer to the felt experience that makes the next phase of the journey more durable. Second, prepare for moment 2 before it arrives. Write down specifically what a 20% portfolio decline means in dollar terms at your current portfolio size, and then write down what the recovery has historically looked like and how long it has historically taken. Not to predict the future, to make the abstract concrete before the concrete arrives in an alarming form. The investor who has done this math in advance is not caught off guard by a crash. They were told by themselves in advance what was coming, and they wrote it down. Third, track the ratio of annual portfolio returns to annual salary, even when the ratio is very small, beginning now. In year 1, the ratio might be 1%. In year 5, 8%. In year 10, 18%. Each year's ratio is a data point that makes the eventual crossover feel like an arrival rather than a surprise. The salary crossover does not feel real if you are not watching for it. Track the ratio. Watch it move. The movement is the compound interest chart translated into a number that your current year's self can actually feel. The chart is right. The math is not wrong. Compound interest will do what the 30-year projection says it will do for the people who are still invested at year 30. The gap between the chart and the 2.91 is not a flaw in the math. It is the gap between knowing and feeling. And the feeling arrives in 3 specific moments at 3 specific points in the journey, each one making the next more reachable. The 2.91 in month 1 is not a disappointment. It is the first unit of the thing that will eventually work harder than you do. It does not feel like that yet. It will. I am not a financial advisor, and none of this is financial advice. These are just patterns I have watched play out with real numbers and real felt experiences attached. Take what is useful and leave the rest. If this named something you have been experiencing in your own investment journey, drop a comment and tell me which of the 3 moments you have already reached. I actually read every single one. And if you want to see the video about the 3 patterns that cause most people to sabotage themselves right before 100,000, it is right there on your screen. That one and this one are the same conversation from 2 different angles. I will see you in it.